Hi, welcome back to my garden. Now, I have to confess, I am aware that the last series of videos have perhaps been a little self-indulgent, maybe. I don't think for a moment that it's going to serve as a sort of an inspiration. But this process of picking apart your life and trying to make sense of how you got to a particular point, how you move on from there. Well, if these videos aren't an inspiration, perhaps a better way of describing them would be as to serve as some sort of exemplar that you might attempt a similar process. And if it does that, I think, well, I'd like to think it's been worthwhile. Anyway, the question at hand, why I'm not doing the things that I would like to do, how I got to a point in my life where I suppose I was driven by materialistic and hedonistic goals. How did that happen? What happened to the sort of the more idealistic, creative me, which probably would have been a good description of who I was when I was in my sort of pre-adolescent phase. Now, I suggested over the past few videos that you have to look at your parents and not that this is an exercise in the blame game, nor do I want to leave the feeling that I think my parents were these terribly materialistic people who judged people by what they had. But I do think that they saw life as something that was difficult, and they saw the plus side of life being the things that gave you pleasure or brought joy to you. And amongst those, beyond family and I think they certainly, both our parents, took parenting very seriously. They did their best, whether they were successful or not. And they made sacrifices thinking of my brother and I's well-being. I think they did. Again, whether they were successful or not is neither here nor there. I do believe that was their intention. But this idea that life was inherently difficult, that perhaps the dice were loaded against you, people from the right sort of family, people with greater means, wealth, privilege, would be favoured. I suspect they felt that the only way of fighting that system was through, your own intellectual capacity, your talents and gifts. But it didn't change the fact that the objective was, I guess, to be successful so that you could overcome the odds. And inherent in that is a sort of implicit suggestion that, as so many people put it, well, it's a lot easier to be happy with stuff than without it. And certainly the things that interested me, and I think the things that interest almost all of us, on some level, somewhere, there will be, almost always, costs attached. And the ability to buy things or make things happen, well, it's facilitated by a better job or things like that. So my desire to travel, well, it would be easier to travel if my parents had been millionaires. I loved books. But when I went to the the bookshop and looked at the shelves, I had to make a decision, a choice, this one or that. Whereas other folk with greater means, well, that was never a question. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. And I changed my view entirely that, in fact, that need to make a choice lends meaning. But for a long time, that was my kind of idea, that the good life, the comfortable life, the enjoyable life would be facilitated with money. And another area which I felt quite strongly was growing up, went to all-boys senior school, and I was very busy, so my social life, I wouldn't say was limited, but I really didn't have a rich and varied experience, let's put it that way. And as I grew older, a number of experiences suggested to me that had I been somehow better, taller, wealthier, I had a car, I don't know, you name it. If there was something different, physically or materially, well, I'd have got the girl. As it was, I seemed to go through university and my early working life, meeting a load of girls that I found very attractive, and almost inevitably, they had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend surpassed me in some fairly obvious metric, and inevitably it would be either something physical, taller, whatever, or wealth, or so it seemed to me. I think this was a projection, of course. I think if I dug a little more deeply, I would have found that they could have said exactly the same about me. They could have felt exactly the same, different things, but I had my plus points too, as we all do. And in fact, I was sort of playing a game where I was almost happy to fail. All this changed. My worldview started to change when I went to Peru, because my assumptions about what would make me successful, what would allow me to have the good life, and the difficulties, disadvantages that I felt I faced and perhaps I'd inherited or sort of absorbed. I don't want to call it a victim mentality, but maybe it was. All that got turned on its head when I went to Peru, because suddenly, and I've spoken about this before, suddenly instead of being one of the shorter guys in the room, I was tall. Instead of being how I felt, an ordinary looking sort of person, kind of just a stocky bearded chap, suddenly I had blue eyes and I was exotic and different. And instead of being a struggling school teacher, I was a school teacher and at a private school, and consequently, compared to almost everyone that I was meeting, I was exceptionally well off, actually. Everything got turned on its head, and I started playing the life game very differently, both in terms of relationships, being a little bit more daring, cavalier, outgoing, and also in terms of what I expected from life. Because suddenly I thought, well, I want adventures, I can have them. They were easily done. At the end of a term, I'd check out some money from my bank, get on a plane and go somewhere extraordinarily exciting. Something that was almost impossible to imagine when I was growing up in Port Elizabeth or at the university in Cape Town, or even working in London. You know, the idea that if I'd thought of this in 1993, when I was working at a comprehensive in London, idea that before the decade was out, I would be going on a dive expedition to the Caribbean, that I would have the amazing life I was having, would have been unthinkable. And strangely, twists and turns, and there I was. Now, I've been thinking about all of this. It comes back to a point, though, where I look at how, at the moment, here in my little paradise, my exotic corner in the northeast of Brazil, retired at 47, pursuing my dreams, here I still find myself engaged in what I would call time-wasting self-sabotage. I don't need to spell that out. The internet and many other things. But particularly, if I was to pick one sort of area, it is YouTube videos. That would be my first partner in the crime of self-sabotage. And why? Why do I carry on these sorts of negative reinforcing loops? And I think it's because, on some level, the sort of underlying message in that script that I picked up all those years ago, growing up in South Africa, the underlying message was, don't expect too much, because you'll be disappointed. Work hard, be grateful for what you get, but don't expect too much. And that's, of course, is fantastic advice. I would go so far as to suggest that perhaps we should expect nothing, a sort of Buddhist resignation to what fate offers us. Take it with equal equanimity. But I don't. And is that sort of, on some fundamental level, is that something that holds me back, that I still don't accept that this wonderful life that I rationally can see is available to me, and indeed I am enjoying. I'm immensely grateful for that. But that somehow it's not actually the life I was meant to live. And it's more than I might have reasonably anticipated. And therefore I should stick rather than twist. I think I've got that the right way around. I'm not a blackjack player. Don't split the cards, just be satisfied with what you've got. Cash in your chips. I don't believe that rationally, but I do think that on a very deep sort of subconscious level, there's an internal struggle there. Maybe. And so, that's the enemy, that's the form that my internal resistance takes, maybe. I guess I need to roll up my sleeves for the fight. Because what I do believe, and I believe this is true for absolutely all of us, that we have the potential to lead extraordinarily rich lives. In terms of what we accomplish, the things that the universe has to offer us. We have amazing possibilities at our fingertips. They might not be what we would immediately articulate, but they're there. And we really need to adopt a sort of abundance as well as growth mindset. Well, another, as I said at the beginning, potentially self-indulgent dive into the murky depths of my psyche. If something's sort of blatantly obvious to you and you think I might have missed it, let me know. Don't be shy. Don't hold back. I'd love to hear. Or perhaps if some of this resonates with you, let's start a conversation. Otherwise, trust your lives are filled with joy. And until next week, from a sunny Brazil, ciao.